Welcome to Leadership in Action. I am Renee Meddy, Senior Partner at Orca HR, and I'm here with Paul O'Byrne, our CEO. We show up here every Thursday at 9 a.m. for 15 minutes to share common leadership challenges with actionable tips that you can implement right away. And today we are talking about executive presence.
Yeah, and so Renee and I were talking about executive presence, and one of the challenges about executive presence is it's kind of a word that's defined by others, and it's not always clear what they mean. And, we had talked about, our observations of working with executives who are giving sort of feedback on somebody, and they would sort of say, well, that person lacks executive presence. And nobody would ever ask them to define exactly what they mean. And it was assuming that everybody was talking about the same thing. So today, what we'll do is we're going to kind of break it down into a couple of different components. So we can kind of understand a little bit more like a holistic view around what are some of the things that might make up executive presence. But for real clarity, sometimes you actually will have to ask questions of others to understand what do they actually mean. So Renee, when you and I were talking about it, you were saying yes, and how you think about executive presence. So I'd just love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think, especially when it comes to these buzzword phrases that can come about, especially in the business sector, people come in with models and words, but they don't really talk about what's underlying and maybe what the behavior looks or feels like. Executive presence is such a feel thing versus a talk about or tangible for a lot of people. So when I think about executive presence, I think about it more energetically. And so it's when your internal alignment is strong enough to be felt externally by others. And so your values, your voice, kind of your vibe are all in sync, and others know. They might not be able to put a finger on exactly what it is, but it's not really about the performance side. It's about how congruent we are in what we say, what we do, and how it gets expressed. So,
Yeah, actually, that's really interesting, that sort of congruence of sort of all parts of you and how that impacts.
yeah.
Um, Yet one of the challenges about executive presence, it's based many times on perception. And perception is what other people bestow upon you. But unfortunately, when some people bestow that upon you, they may make decisions based on that perception. And
Yeah.
that's kind of one of the challenges about it. But as I say, as you say, if there's congruence, people may have perception. We also talk about, and we teach this in a lot of our programs around strategic self-awareness. And so strategic self-awareness is kind of the you that I know me to be and the you that others know me to be. And so this is why, being sort of self-aware, both from your own perspective and also how others might see you, can be really, really important, just even in this topic of executive presence.
Yeah, it makes me think sometimes when, I'm in these conversations, I get this image or imagery of things. And so executive presence, like if you think of our body, right, an outline of the body, most people think that it ends like right at the skin. But then there's a field outside of that that many people, I'd say 99.9% of people have had some experience feeling, when you walk into a parking garage and all of a sudden you feel a little unsafe, or you walk into a conversation and you like open the door and realize they're either talking about you or something,
Or there's
that's not,
tension in the room that you can
yeah,
literally
and then
cut with
you
a
turn
knife.
and close the door, right? Like
Yeah.
you've had that feeling. And so when I think about executive presence, some people's energetic field is maybe a half inch off their body or 2 inches off their body, but someone with energetic presence is like they walk in a big bubble that maybe, like, depending on the level of presence they have, and you get to be part of that bubble, and they almost draw you in. Um, but something you said, that we were talking about was that we have perceptions of people at first glance or in a moment or one interaction, and then we hold that perception for years, decades. And so the idea, and someone with executive presence, I think it's not just a thing or a state that you get to. I think there's layers of, and different parts of themselves that they will not, I mean, we're all human. We do it all the time where we have a perception and hold it. But there's a little more flow in, like, yeah, that was them 5 years ago, but they have the openness to re-engage with someone with like beginner's mind or something like that.
Yeah, and kind of break it down. So we have this model which kind of sort of breaks it down into sort of I suppose bite-sized pieces. And so it's this sort of trio model around character, credibility, and style, right? But just like, to define them, when people talk about character, they talk about authenticity, integrity, concern, and humility. And so, I think it was Jim Collins who, in his Good to Great, talked about, the X factor of great leadership was not personality, but humility. And it was really interesting. I was having a conversation with two leaders, one I'm coaching and one who's the executive of the person I'm coaching. And we were having kind of alignment meeting around their development. And the whole word humility came up. And the senior executive said, you know, without humility, there sometimes can be no learning.
For sure.
Because
Hmm.
if you literally kind of think you know everything,
Yeah,
well,
you
there's
come
no
in already
opportunity.
knowing. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
character was one of the things that came up, and then the other one is credibility is around sort of and this is maybe a little bit around how do you show up, sort of your composure, your confidence, and even sort of like that potential vision that you might have. So they break that down into credibility, and then the last one was style, which is around, and this is based on a model called the Bates model of executive presence, if people wanted to research it more. And they talk about intentionality, inclusiveness, and assertiveness. And so, we don't have time to go into each one of those particular things, but inclusiveness is being able to bring other people in. And then assertiveness is your ability to be able to have confidence and courage in relation to either your own particular view of some things. And then intentionality is you're intentional about, how you're showing up. And so when people are kind of, and I'm sure you've had to coach people where, the feedback has been, okay, well, they don't show a lot of executive presence,
Yeah. Yeah.
we've kind of had to break it down, you know?
Well, I think there's so many great models out there, but at least the ones I've seen, there is a component that's always missing, which is groundedness, right? So if you take that metaphor of the bubble again, they can have this great presence, and they're kind of floating around, but they need the groundedness as an anchor. Especially, a lot of CEOs or visionaries, and so it can be like, oh, here and then over here and over here, that there needs to be a groundedness that is built
How
in
would you
to
how would
most
you
of the
define
models.
groundedness?
Um, Groundedness is there's a steadiness about you. I think of it as like the old school punching bags, with sand in the bottom, that you can uh, respond effectively. You can be resilient and bounce back quickly with not a lot of reaction. And there's just a steadiness about someone in the groundedness. But again, it's groundedness is something that you can definitely feel, and is can be a little bit harder to, at least for me, to put language around it that's tangible. So coming up with like the punching bag analogy, and like there's movement, and capacity for all the different things, but then there's something that just tethers you to the literally to the ground, like to the earth. So
And when I think about groundedness, I think it's your ability, to sort of stay present.
mhm.
It's
Yeah,
kind of like what's that? The desiderata when, to sort of stay calm when everybody around you is kind of losing their head.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
remember I worked with a very senior executive of Microsoft, and it was quite incredible when everybody was like in a very reactive state. There's some sort of things that would come up. He could
mhm.
stay calm within the storm. And then he would be that sort of calming person to be able to move people forward. So I think that's really important, is that ability to sort of to stay present, even though, like I used to call it sort of it's kind of like the Matrix. It's like, when all the bullets are coming at you, that you're able to
Yeah,
sort of stay grounded and present in that
yeah,
place, you
yeah.
know?
It's almost like, our backgrounds are blurred, but we're clear. It's that kind of like you're grounded, but there's a swirl around you or chaos around you, but you're able to have clarity and
So we've just a
yeah,
minute or two left. If somebody like has either had feedback around executive presence, or it's something that they would like to work on, what would be your tip for, somebody who says, okay, look, it's something that I would like to work on?
yeah. I mean, I ask a lot of questions about their current state of affairs and, perceptions of that their team have about them, that their manager have about them. But I always start with getting back, like, do you know who you are? What do you stand for? What are your values? Because so many times in these leadership positions, we talk a lot about how people end up in leadership. It's not always like a goal, but they fall into leadership by accident. And then the wheel just starts spinning and you just start going down and you never anchored into who are you as a leader? What perception, how do you want people to see you? What's your style? So I get really practical with it first. And then simultaneously, we start working on nervous system regulation too, because when you're in, big roles or have a lot of stress and chaos around you, the brain is wired to protect. And so we figure out where they are on that scale. How reactive are they? How much clarity do they have? How are they communicating it?
So what I'm hearing you say is kind of connect to yourself first,
Hmm.
that whole thing on awareness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, y- y- you know, um, and I think the other piece is when if you're missing particular information, and this is where it sometimes takes a little humility to do, is go and seek feedback from others.
Hmm.
Ask others what are they saying, um, or ask others, what is one thing that I could do differently that's going to either make me connect better with you or whatever. And you can get a lot of information from that. And it's so interesting. Sometimes people, um, one, are afraid to ask,
Yeah. They don't want to hear
uh,
the feedback.
because either they don't want to hear the feedback, or it kind of like, if they do, oh my God, now people sort of see me worse or whatever. And rather than sort of seeing this as this is your opportunity to embrace vulnerability and take on some of that, and also get much better data and information that
Yeah.
can help you, you
Hmm.
know. So I know we're done. So yeah, we could spend a lot more
A
time, as
lot
we
of
could
time
in
on
any of
this.
these sessions, on we call it, either leadership presence or executive presence. And thank you, Renee, for sharing your
Yeah.
thoughts today.
Always fun. We'll see everyone next week.
Yep.